Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next perfect step, where all possibilities lie in conversation. I'm your co host, Laurie Mullen.
And I'm your co-host, Lori Tremblay. Today we have a special guest, a return guest is Kim McStay, owners of Raven's Rest Ranch. And we have a couple of announcements before we start talking to Kim about what the work she does and her healing work. The first announcement is our own Lori Mullen has written a book.
Yay.
Called Living Your Dream Life. So can you just give us we'll feature that in a future podcast, but please just tell us a little bit about it. So exciting.
So for the last 5 years, I've been working with clients and, I really realized, and in my own journey, that I didn't feel fulfilled in life. I was happy, but for the most part, there were just in between times where, I just didn't feel fulfilled. Joyful. And so I realized that there was a lot of people who didn't feel that, who felt that way also. And so I wrote a book. It's called Living Your Dream Life. And it's the discovery of how to authentically discover who you are and what brings you joy. What would your dream life look like? And it's not in the grand things. It's not the new job or winning the lottery. It's in the baby steps. And that starts within. That starts in the journey within yourself. When you start to become what you want to see in the world, that is when your life changes. And so my book is about practical steps. It's gratitude, mindful, journaling, really asking the deep questions of yourself in order to find what your dream life would even look like, how it would feel, how you want your relationships to look in the world, how you want to interact with people, how you want to leave your mark on this world. So that is what my book is about. So I hope you enjoy it. It is on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Apple Books. Anywhere you can find your ebooks, and then there's also the paper book right now on Amazon. So I hope you enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it.
Oh, congratulations. We're so happy for you. That's fantastic.
That's dynamite.
Yeah. So another little announcement that we have is the three of us, Kim, Lori, and I, are going to be running some workshops in the spring at Kim's ranch, her Raven's Rest Ranch. She's got a beautiful space with 35 acres.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a lot of exciting things in the works for that. So we'll keep you posted on the dates for the workshops, what that's about. And I think some of the things that maybe Lori's going to talk about is in her book, and Kim's got some special things to share about what she does. So without further ado, welcome back, Kim. We're happy to have you. Please tell us how you got started with your healing journey and what you're all about.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for having me on this interview. I really appreciate it. It's been really great getting to know both of you. So I'm pretty excited about this spring and starting a new venture. I have been doing my personal healing work pretty much since I moved here 40 years ago, which I realized I've been here for 40 years. Wow. And I was married for 23 of those years, and I dabbled in the healing work from an exercise aspect. So I had my personal trainer's certification and aerobic certification, and wound up doing a lot of the high school exercise programs and sort of became familiar with the community through that. I was approached by a chiropractor in town who liked the exercises that I was giving to people. And so she had me working for her for a while doing exercise programs for her clients. And that really opened me up to the community and gave me a basis for that. And after my divorce, I really focused on the energy portion of what I do, which I always did as a kid, but I hid it for a very long time because I just, I grew up with the nickname Spooky. So, so it was something that I tried to not share as much as I could until I was on my own. And then I started sharing. So
I think that happens a lot with people, young people that have gifts and sensitivities and abilities, and they're not understood or supported. And then you just kind of shut those gifts down, right? And so it's wonderful. Are your siblings also gifted?
My siblings are very gifted, and all in very different ways. But they all do, or at least embrace a lot of the energy work, and they're tapped into the spirit world and a lot of different things and channeling. One of my sisters does a lot of channeling, and for herself and not always for other people, because we were kind of pushed down with it. And my grandmother on my dad's side, I think, was incredibly gifted. And she and I became very close through that, because she didn't dare to talk to anybody. And her generation, that was like, you're crazy if you are. So we had a lot of great conversations, and she experienced that inner vibration that you get and both of you are energy workers, so you know what I mean by that. But you get, the more that you do it, the more you feel that inner vibration. And my grandmother felt it all the time and thought trucks were driving through her house. She was so funny, because it really bothered her to feel that. So, now I kind of try to talk to her through the spirit world and say, oh, I know what that was for you. So, yeah. So that's what got me started, was basically as a kid.
Wow. Great.
And you also work with animals and
Yes.
nature and all of that. And you've rescued animals, which I think is just wonderful. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So as a youngin, I like to think of myself as a feral child. At the age of, yeah.
Because I've heard you say that before.
Yes, yeah, and it really is true. So at the age of 6, we got our first pony. My sister came home with it. My dad owned a flying school, and so on the way to the airport, there was this little Shetland pony on the yard tied to a tether. And my sister decided that it needed a different home, and the people were moving, and they were glad to get rid of this pony. And she had asked my parents about it, and we lived in a little suburby place. And so it was pretty funny that she wanted to take this pony home. And my dad said, well, what do you have in your piggy bank? And she said, $25. He said, sure, you can buy the pony. That's great. Well, they sold it to her for $25. So she brought the pony home.
That's precious.
And we put it in the tool shed. And of course, 2 days later, the neighbors are all up in arms because it just ran through all their clotheslines and got into all kinds of trouble. And so we ended up building a house on the other part of town. And it was pretty big. And we had, I believe it was around 6 acres, which was a lot in the town that we lived in. And we ended up with like 8 horses at that time. And I, at the age, really probably between 6 and 8, I would ride this little pony all through the town and be gone all day long. And he was a horrible pony. He bit me, he reared up on me, he did all kinds of stuff. I'd tighten his girth and he'd, go taking off, stop, put his head down and saddle, and myself would end up on the ground, and he'd go home and I'd have to walk home with the saddle. And I spent a lot of time with him, and then the rest of the time I spent with nature. And I walked all the time. When I got home from school, I was outside. I was playing in the brooks. I was imagining little fairies around, and I absolutely loved my feral life. It was, and I really felt I could speak to the wild animals, and they talked back, and I didn't tell anyone that because I thought that was kind of crazy. But now with things like the telepathy tapes and coming out and expressing how, telepathy is possible, I really truly believe I have that connection with wildlife.
Yes.
Some humans, but mostly animals and wildlife.
Right.
So it's been I probably the animals, like I had what I thought was a pet squirrel, and I had a pet fly, so, and we had hamsters, and I used to put them in my dollhouse, and, I was just so much more nature and animal oriented than I was people. Mm-hmm. And, I spent a lot of time at the airport with my dad, but never saw him. I was always off in the woods or, all of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, that's how I started with the animals. I think my first rehab was a squirrel that was abandoned, and I was very young back then. And my parents did allow me to keep it and take care of it. And my siblings helped with that. And probably the second one was, the birds that fall out of the nest without any feathers. Mm-hmm. And I took a lot of those. They were not successful. They didn't live very long. And as I grew older, I, of course, during this whole time, I was starting to show with horses and horse shows. And I spent a lot of time away from home, a lot of time, with maybe one adult checking in on us, maybe once a day for an hour. And the rest of the time, it was just a bunch of kids in a hotel room, so your imagination can fly from there. And, we had a lot of fun at the horse shows and became quite a horse show community. And my dad was convinced that I was going to, become some great rider. And he was wrong. I ended up breaking my back when I was in my teens, and they were Christian Scientists, so I wasn't able to have it diagnosed. So I spent a few years with a broken back, not knowing what had happened, and it healed, but I really struggled with pain. I am, on the other hand, incredibly grateful for that happening to me, because it got me into the healing work that I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. So when I look back on it, I only see the silver lining that I did not see back then, but I saw it, as time went on. And I'm not even really sure. I did end up going to the hospital when I was 20, and they took a CAT scan, but I don't really know even who paid for that, because I was young and I didn't have insurance. And my brother was the one that brought me to the hospital, because my parents didn't do that sort of thing. And come to find out, I had fractured my back, and I had a herniated disc that had re-herniated quite a few times. And even though I tried really hard to continue riding, it just was too painful. So I had to give it up. And then I got into the self-healing aspect of things and really worked hard, and it's how I work with my clients now is I try to explain that to them, that, the self-healing comes in a lot of different ways. It comes in your own mindset. It comes in how you treat your body. And it also comes from outside help. And that was the part that was the hardest for me, because being raised as a Christian Scientist, you're not supposed to do those sort of things. Mm-hmm. So I'm grateful to the religion for the understanding of healing aspect, but not for, I do reach out when I need to. Mm-hmm. I just don't particularly trust the medical system right now. So, yeah.
Well, I've had the benefit of a session with you, and other friends and family have also. So I'm really grateful. I think you have a definite gift, because you do physical work on the body, plus you do energy work, and I know you are gifted with the animals. So it's just beautiful to see you in action.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. I do love my work, and it took me a long time to put it on my business card that I did energy work, and the way that I have sort of labeled it now is intuitive healer. I have taken a lot of courses. My chiropractor that I worked for is a dynamite person, and she really taught me a lot about the human body, about the spine, the vertebrae and the discs. And, so I was able to work with a lot of her clients because I had experienced a lot of that pain. So I was able to put myself into their body and give them tips and ideas and ways to move and stretches to do so that they could feel better physically. The emotional end of it probably is a more recent thing, working with people, because I really understand how our emotions affect everything that we do physically. And that the emotional baggage that we carry sometimes isn't even detected until we start to go into the body. And, I've done workshops in the past on partnering with your body, where you can identify some of the emotions that might affect certain aspects. And I know in the spiritual world, we tend to say, oh, you drew that to you because of the emotions that you express. I don't really see it that way. I see it more that you might be sensitive in an area in your body that needs to call out to you to say, okay, this is an emotional aspect that you really need to target and figure out what's going on and release some of this. And until you do that, the body is going to continue to scream at you until you listen. And so I feel that it's not that we draw in these diseases or these aches and pains. It's that our body is just literally an alarm system just trying to help us figure it out. And, I think the most challenging part working with people is trying to get them to let go of their patterns of pain and to let go of their addiction to pain. And they don't even realize they're addicted to it. But that low frequency keeps you in a place where you can't heal. And until you raise yourself up from that frequency and go into a level where you can address a lot of your issues and problems and see them all as co-creative working together, then all of a sudden it opens up and you can heal. And that means opening up to whatever is available out there.
Beautiful. Thank you. Do you have any questions, Lori, or comments?
No, I think that your work is absolutely amazing. And I do think that, one of the toughest things is to let go. We don't realize that we're getting something from the pain or the sickness or whatever. And until we can discover that and let it go, not saying that 100% heals you, but it's part of the process, right? It's part of the process of focusing on the negative and letting go of our need, whatever need that is. And that's not easy. It's definitely something that needs support and self-discovery. And I think that what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely blossoming more and more it seems like every session and with the animals, I think they ground me. So when I rescue, I've had a raccoon living in my house. I've had a fisher cat, which I know people freak out about that. And they're actually fishers. We added the cat to it. But I have to admit that is the most gentle animal rehab wise I've ever dealt with. And she lived in my house for a few months before she was paralyzed. So I had to rehabilitate that part of her. And I knew she wasn't fully paralyzed because she could crawl away from her food to go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And to me, that meant she had some awareness of that. I mean, I had to make her go to the bathroom. But when she discovered her legs a little bit, I started bringing her outside and trying to remind her of where she really lived. Wow. And I had a hammock, and I'm not even sure how I ever had the time to sit in it, but I would. I think because I thought she was so funny. But because they go upside down, okay. And she would go up the tree and down across the hammock, across my body, up the other tree. And she would do that for the longest time. And it really helped her get her leg strength back. So after about 5 months, which I found out that Fisher, because I had to research a lot, I wasn't even sure what she was because she was just about that big when someone brought her to me, and their dog had gotten a hold of her. And, you know, long story short, I went for my rehab license, and they, during a time where they were putting animals to sleep because of rabies, and I opted to not go that route. And I tried to give her to a rehab situation, but they were going to euthanize her. So we just figured she wasn't going to make it because she was paralyzed. But anyway, she ended up making it, and she left for days at a time and would come back. But with a Fisher, they actually will leave at least a few miles from where they were raised and start their own life. So I knew that she wasn't going to stay with us. And after a while, she left for good, and it was very sad, but I was very happy for her that she was able to do that. And that winter, she stole all my chicken's eggs, but never ate a chicken. And she loved playing with my cats. So they have a bad rap, but
They scream.
they scream. And many times I have friends who were over, and you know, they'd say, just let her in, and she'd be hanging on the screen screaming, and I'm like, she's going to run across all of you. She's not, don't try to hold her. She's wild. So, and yeah, so she was quite an addition to our family for a little while. And my daughter Cheyenne and she were quite connected, and they played very rough together. And I'm sure a lot of people will find a lot of fault in that, but Cheyenne tells everybody how she loved being raised that way, that we always had weird animals in the house and animals that people didn't want, that I would try to find homes for. And I did that to my parents as well, that I used to bring home all kinds of dogs and cats that people didn't want, and they would live in my barn, and I'd take care of them and find homes for them. So it's been an ongoing, I even do it with people. I adopted one of my daughters, and now I'm raising her son. And so, yeah, it spreads out to all of it. But the animal connection for me on the earth grounding basis is that, you know, I love working with people, but they put a lot of judgment and fear factor, and you know, they might feel great for a day or two, but then when everything feeds back into their mind, they re-experience things. Where animals, they don't do that. You know, they live in the moment, and they recover quickly. So, you know, they live with this survival mechanism. So if something scares them, they will, you know, take off away from that fear. But then within, you know, minutes, they're back to, okay, I'm not going to waste all that energy on running. I'm protected. I'm away from the problem, and I'm good to go. And so for me, that's so grounding when I've been working with humans, and then I'm able to go work with horses, or sometimes mules, sometimes, you know, little minis, sometimes all kinds of different animal, different horse, equine. And equines are my favorite because, unlike dogs, they don't care if, you know, if they please you. Dogs want to please you, and sometimes they, you know, aren't their true authentic self when you're working with them. But the horses are always authentic.
Yeah.
And
they have like a regal presence.
They really do. And Lori Mullen, you've worked with horses a lot, so you know where I'm coming from on that. They just watching them, I could watch them for hours and just be amazed at how well they navigate nature.
Wow.
You know, and we're nature, but we don't navigate it very well. We have gotten so far away from the nature that we are. And which is what I really hope to bring about this spring and this summer in the workshops is, you know, reconnect ourselves to our nature, to who we are as nature. And, you know, I mean, the world's a little bit crazy out there. So if we can figure out how to be community, how to be, you know, part of nature as our community, I think that'll be really helpful.
Yeah. And your land is so special. It's got such a beautiful energy and just beauty, natural beauty, and it just feels good and peaceful to be on your land. So,
Thank you. I
yeah.
think so too. I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to have my coffee and look out my window and just know that, that's protected land that will stay that way as long as I'm alive. And it's just, yeah, it feeds my soul all the time.
Yeah. And Lori's been on your land too.
It's beautiful land.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your Fisher story is my favorite. I love hearing that story.
Yeah,
Do you think
she
you
was
described
something.
the horses? I mean, I think that animals, um, we're connected to animals, but they're also here, they're teachers too. They have lessons that they come with, and I think that you describe the horses beautiful. They are regal, and they come with an energy of freedom, right? Freedom from judgment, freedom from self-doubt, freedom from, they're just confident in themselves. And like you said, they're just, they don't care. They don't want to please you. They're there to please themselves. And yeah, and their energy is wonderful. And I believe all, I mean, they eat, like you said, with dogs, but dogs teach us loyalty, right? I mean, they are the most
Mhm.
loyal things ever, even to
Yes.
people who they shouldn't be, right? And I've talked many times about, even animals we find scary, like snakes. I mean, they shed their skin without even looking back. They don't look back at their old skin. They don't mourn their old skin. They just create new skin. And
Exactly.
I love that connection with animals. I love looking for what they hear, um, what their energy is, and their lessons. I just find them absolutely fascinating, the connection that we have.
Yeah. And sometimes animals like come appear to us because they have a lesson. I mean, like we'll have something that we need to learn, and so that animal will appear, right?
Oh, I fully believe that. I mean, I embrace that wholeheartedly because I've had animals come into my life. I have a horse now who was born in Montana in, like 200,000 acres of land. And she was brought over here. And I mean, she has taught me so much about patience, about fear, about loyalty with your eye out the door, the escape route. As she is, I mean, everybody laughs that meets her because she is a lot like me. But I didn't know that, and I refused to believe that about her. She just frustrated me. And I had worked with so many horses in my lifetime and, I used to ride 14 horses a day when I went to camp, and all different personalities, all incredible. But she frustrated me. And that was hard for me to accept. And of course, it also made me realize once I did finally see myself in her that I must really frustrate people. And with, which is, I've worked on a lot thanks to her. And, she's still with me, and she's a year older than Hayden. So I got them at the same time.
Oh,
And they both moved in that week. My mother actually stayed with Hayden when I went to go get her. And unbeknownst to me, she was there waiting for me. I didn't go to get her. I went to get my friend's horse, and they had left her in the round pen and said, please take her. Because long story how I got to know her, but I went to Vermont and I met her probably 2 weeks prior to that. And she was, I'll try to make it very short story, but she was very unpredictable, and they were having a really hard time with her. And, I'm fearless most of the time and sometimes just plain crazy. And so I took it upon myself to bond with her and to, telepathically connect with her, which I did. And I spent 3 hours with her, and she was flipping over backwards when people would try to get on her. So I thought, well, I don't think I'm going to like go off and ride this horse, but I'm going to at least get her to let me get on her and off of her. And it literally did. It took me 3 hours. I had to run next to her with my arm around her in the round pen, just so that she'd get used to having something on her near her. And, they were like, well, if you want it, and then she wouldn't let me catch her. She'd take off and I couldn't catch her even in the round pen. And, they wanted me to bribe her with food. And I said, nope, not doing that. Like, that just to me is not, there's no connection there. It's just,
Right.
and horses don't work that way. I mean, they'll just take total advantage of the food and never speak to you again or run you over to get to the food. So we spent some time together, and I did finally saddle her up, and I got on her and off her 2 or 3 times, called it quits. And then they called me and asked if I would take her because they had sent a bunch of them to the trainers, and because she flipped over backwards, they didn't really want to deal with that. And she did flip over backwards on my daughter. I was not around when that happened, and my daughter's an excellent rider. So I think that just has been in her system. I think she had an experience with a mountain lion because I sensed that in her. And, if you do believe in telepathy, I had a conversation with her about it. And for her to be able to get that off of her, she had to flip over, and then she ran away from it. So, and I think it was when she was a young foal. So I sort of understood that, and I ride her, but it's one of those things I have to mentally prepare myself to be able to connect with her so that I can ride her safely.
Wow.
So, but she has taught so many people about trust that have been in my workshops, because for them to get to touch her, and this was a few years back when I did the workshops, was like this big thing. And we all want to do that thing we can't accomplish. So by the end of the workshops, if they had been able to touch her or, get her to look at them, they were thrilled. And it was just amazing to me how each one of my horses changed for whoever was there. Wow. And I had to trust that. And I had to stop saying to people, this is what this horse is like. This is horse's personality. It really taught me that it's always a clean slate with horses. They figure it out.
You were sharing with me at one point about a woman in your workshop that had lost her husband, was it? She was grieving, and what happened with the horse?
So I have another one who I named Montana because it's my favorite state. And I love going there, and I miss it all the time. I haven't been there in years now, and I really miss it. But he's a smaller guy, and I got him from an auction house, and I call him Mr. Jumpy because, when people touch him, he jumps. It's just his personality. He's really sweet, and he turned out to be a great lesson pony and all of this kind of stuff. But he doesn't really like to hang with people. And so with my workshops, I would have people wander around in the field with them and just, kind of ground themselves in the property and just kind of watch the horses and observe their behavior, see who they connected with. And at that time I had more than I have now, and see who you connect with. And then that can be the horse that you use in the workshop. Wow. So this one doesn't usually connect. He just lets people be a little bit next to him. And this woman, I could tell she was struggling with being in the group because of her grief. And so I told her, and he had a halter on at that time and a lead rope. And I said, if you want to just take him over and be by yourself, go ahead and do that. And we're going to work on this part of the group. And she did. And when I took off his halter, he stayed with her for, I don't even know how long it was, but he stayed with her. It's going to make me cry. And it was just, here I was knowing this pony horse as who he was, and he just blew me away because that is not his personality, but he felt her and he communicated with her. And it was amazing. It was just amazing. And that's why I love incorporating the animals, especially the horses, into the workshops, because they show us more about ourselves than we could ever learn in like sitting in a chair doing talk therapy.
Yes.
I mean, It's like, I spent a week in Arizona with a herd of horses, and a bunch of psychologists who were all there. I was like one of the only ones that didn't have my psychology degree. And we worked with these horses and we learned how to incorporate them into, it was equine assisted learning is what they called it. And, I had an experience with a mule there that I will never forget. And this mule was one of these mules that they had named him Trainwreck. And that sort of, I don't even have to go from there, what guy was like. And everybody went out into the field and got their horse that they were going to work with for the week. And I'm walking around and they're all running from me. And I'm thinking, okay, I have bad energy this week. Like, I got to work on that. Like, what is going on? And then finally I turn around and there's this mule following me and all the horses are afraid of him. And he's like locked on. I didn't even hear him behind me. And so I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I'm working with you. And I got him back to the place, which I had to water ski across the field because he literally dragged me over to the building we were working in. And the person that was the equine assisted professional said to me, no, we don't work with mules. And I said, well, tell him that. Like, no other horse wanted to come near me. So unless you can find me a horse to work with, I guess he's my guy. And he was like the life of the party. And all he wanted was to be invited into these workshops. And he was always never invited. Oh. And so he was really a jerk to most people, rightfully so, because they were only using it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so at the end, I ended up riding him bareback with a halter and lead rope through a labyrinth. And, wow. And I made them all promise that they would start using him because he was so easy after that. And it wasn't anything I did. It was that he was in this group that, was finally seeing him for something other than a mule.
You renamed him, didn't you?
I did. I renamed him Joe, which, was kind of my boyfriend at the time that I was having a lot of trouble with. So yeah,
Joe the Mule.
Joe the Mule, yeah. That was maybe not the best name for him, but yeah.
Better than Trainwreck.
Yes, better than Trainwreck. But he taught me a lot, and he was not easy in the beginning, but he just, he put himself in the round pen in the morning, and they all got a kick out of that. And they're like, Kim, you got to come out here. Look who's waiting for us he wanted to be part of that. Oh. It was just amazing. And so, you just never know. And it's like, with Kai, I would not use her for riding for these workshops because that's not something she's into, but she is amazing for, like, if you don't have anything on her, she'll do anything you want her to do. She just doesn't want to be forced or confined into that. So yeah.
We'll get to meet Kai and Montana at the workshops.
Yes.
They're beautiful horses. And then your two dogs are amazing.
Well, they're not as amazing as the other dogs I've had in my life, but they're working on it. I have one that, again, is very challenging, but that's Hayden's dog, and she will become part of the workshops. I'm convinced.
And your rooster named Mick Jagger.
Yes. Tall, skinny, black legs that he has. He does. He looks like he has leather pants on. But yes. So yeah, that's my clan.
Wow. It's so amazing. Their stories are great. And just showing how that there are teachers and how you were prepared from a young child to connect with nature, to connect with animals, and to, your own injury to become a healer. It's just amazing. And I know that you also have a deep gift that you were born with that's just coming out. So,
well, I know this is probably kind of a crazy story, but I remember picking my family. And it was before I was born, and I remember it like every single detail about it. Wow. My mother had just given birth to my brother, who's 3 years older than I am, and I remember being in the parking lot with my dad and my twin sisters, who, look at the turkeys. Sorry,
I know,
distracted.
I just saw them coming.
Hi, turkeys.
Around.
So as I'm in this parking lot, I remember what my sisters were wearing and I described it. I think I was around 10 years old, and I started talking about it at the dinner table, and my mother started turning white and she just said, "What are you talking about? You were not there. You're 3 years younger than your brother. How could you have been there?" I remember her showing everybody, Chuck, my brother, in the window, and I was in the parking lot with my twin sisters who were 5 years older than me. And yeah, and I know, and I remember seeing my mom thinking, she's sad. And I knew that I had to be in that household to help her through that sadness. And I knew as a very young child, I remember having light beings above my crib. So I must have been, young enough to be in a crib, and, talking to me telepathically about how my life was going to be a little challenging and that I was always protected. And I think that opened me up to the gifts. I think we all have those gifts. Every single one, every single living being, from plants to animals to people, have all of those healing gifts, have all of those intuitive gifts, have all of that.
Definitely.
But it's whether you connect to it or not. And I think because I came in remembering who I was or wasn't, or I came in knowing I was light. And so I feel like I was more connected to it than some because of that experience.
Right. That's beautiful. What a beautiful experience.
It was different.
And to remember it. Yeah.
Hence why I ended up with the name Spooky as a kid.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah. So anything else you ladies would like to know?
Do you have anything, Lori? Any questions?
No, I just look forward. I mean, I love the pyramid of energy that we create, and I very much look forward to our workshops. There's lots of wonderful stuff planned ahead, and we'll give little tidbits every week to look forward to. But I just, thank you for sharing you today, and again, letting people get to know you on a deeper level and your beautiful gifts that you share with the world. Very much looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We all get to work together, which is really exciting.
I'm excited about that.
A new venture that we are been led to go on to together. So, but thank you, Kim, so much for being with us. You're a joy always.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me here and for letting me get to know you ladies. I'm really looking forward to working with you. I have really gotten a lot out of getting to know you and doing this together. So thank you.
Great.
Until next time, how is your intuition leading you to the next perfect step?